My name is Pol Pot. You probably don't know who I am, but I killed 2 million people in just 4 years. 1/4 of my entire nation. I was once an idealistic student in Paris who dreamed of creating a perfect agrarian society, but my utopian vision became humanity's most efficient genocide. This is my confession, not to seek understanding, but to warn you, because the most dangerous monsters are often those who believe they are saving the world. I was born Salaf Sar in 1925 in Prexbao village, about 100 miles north of Phnom Penh. My family were prosperous rice farmers who owned 9 hectares of land and 3 water buffalo. I grew up in traditional Khmer culture, surrounded by Buddhist temples and ancient customs. This peaceful village life would later become my obsession. I believed all of Cambodia should return to this simple, pure existence. My family had connections to the royal court. My cousin was a concubine to King Monivong, and my sister worked in the royal palace. I was sent to live with relatives in Phnom Penh to receive a better education. But seeing the corruption and foreign influence in the capital only strengthened my belief that traditional village life was superior to this decadent urban world. I attended a French Catholic school where I learned to speak French fluently and studied Western literature and history. The French priests taught me about European civilization, but I saw how colonialism was destroying Cambodian culture. I began to hate everything foreign, the French language, Western ideas, even the Catholic religion they tried to force upon us. At Lycée Sisawat in Phnom Penh, I was an average student who preferred sports to academics, but I was already developing radical ideas about Cambodian independence and purity. I failed my baccalaureate exam, which humiliated me deeply. This failure convinced me that the French education system was designed to keep Cambodians inferior. Despite my academic failures, I won a government scholarship to study radio electronics in Paris. Arriving in the City of Light in 1949, I was overwhelmed by Western civilization's complexity and corruption. The contrast between Paris's sophistication and my village's simplicity convinced me that progress was actually decay, that modernity was destroying human happiness. In the cafes of the Latin Quarter, I discovered Marxist theory and joined the French Communist Party. I read Stalin's works and became convinced that only violent revolution could save Cambodia from foreign domination. But I adapted Marxism to my own vision. Instead of industrial workers, I believed peasants were the pure revolutionary class. I formed a tight circle of Cambodian students who shared my revolutionary dreams. Iang Sari, Sun Sen, and others who would later become my closest collaborators in genocide. We spent hours planning Cambodia's future, convinced we were destined to liberate our homeland. We called ourselves the Circle and swore eternal loyalty to our cause. I failed my exams repeatedly and lost my scholarship after 3 years in Paris. The French authorities considered me a troublemaker and were happy to see me go. But I returned to Cambodia in 1953, more radicalized than ever, convinced that Western education was a tool of oppression and that only through destroying the existing order could Cambodia be reborn. Back in Cambodia, I worked as a teacher while secretly organizing for the underground Communist Party. I taught at a private school in Phnom Penh, but I was already planning revolution. I recruited students and intellectuals, telling them that Cambodia's salvation lay in returning to an agrarian paradise free from foreign influence and urban corruption. When Prince Sihanouk's police began hunting communists, I fled to the jungle with my followers. In the remote forests of northeastern Cambodia, we established our base and began building what would become the Khmer Rouge. Living among tribal peoples, I became convinced that primitive life was superior to civilization. This would become the foundation of my genocidal ideology. For 5 years, I built my revolutionary army among Cambodia's poorest peasants. I promised them land, equality, and revenge against the educated elite who had oppressed them. I began developing my theory of Year Zero, the complete destruction of existing society and the creation of a pure agrarian communist state. Violence, I taught my followers, was the only path to paradise. As the Vietnam War spilled into Cambodia, I saw my opportunity. American bombing campaigns killed 150,000 Cambodian civilians and drove hundreds of thousands from their homes. I used this suffering to recruit for my cause, telling refugees that only the Khmer Rouge could protect them from foreign aggression. Each bomb that fell was a gift to my revolution. When General Lon Nol overthrew Prince Sihanouk in 1970, I made a tactical alliance with the deposed monarch. Sihanouk's support gave my movement legitimacy among rural Cambodians who revered the royal family. But I was already planning to eliminate him once I gained power. He represented everything I wanted to destroy about old Cambodia. By 1973, my forces controlled most of rural Cambodia. We surrounded Phnom Penh and began our final assault on the capital. My soldiers were mostly teenage peasants who had been indoctrinated to hate cities, intellectuals, and anything foreign. They were perfect instruments for the destruction I was planning. Young, fanatical, and completely loyal to my vision. On April 17, 1975, my Khmer Rouge forces captured Phnom Penh. Within hours, I ordered the complete evacuation of the city. 2 million people were forced into the countryside at gunpoint. Hospitals were emptied. Patients still connected to IVs were forced to march. I told myself this was necessary to create my agrarian utopia. But I was actually beginning the systematic destruction of Cambodian civilization. I declared year zero, the complete restart of Cambodian history. I abolished money, schools, religion, and private property. Families were separated. Children turned against parents, and anyone who could read was marked for death. I convinced myself I was purifying Cambodia, returning it to its peasant roots, but I was actually destroying everything that made my people human. The killing became systematic and efficient. Anyone who represented the old society had to be eliminated. Intellectuals, teachers, doctors, anyone who wore glasses, anyone who spoke a foreign language. We created execution sites across the country where hundreds of thousands were murdered with clubs and hoes to save bullets. The killing fields became Cambodia's new landscape. As my revolution consumed Cambodia, paranoia consumed me. I began executing my own commanders, convinced they were Vietnamese spies or CIA agents. At S-21 prison in Phnom Penh, we tortured and killed over 14,000 people, including many of my oldest comrades from Paris. I had become so afraid of betrayal that I was destroying my own revolution from within. My attacks on Vietnamese border villages finally provoked retaliation. In December 1978, Vietnamese forces invaded Cambodia and within weeks had driven me back to the jungle. My perfect society had lasted less than 4 years, but in that time, I had killed nearly 2 million of my own people, 25% of Cambodia's population. My utopia had become a graveyard. I spent the next 20 years hiding in the jungle, still claiming to fight for Cambodia while the world largely ignored me. I died in 1998, never facing trial for my crimes, still believing I had tried to save Cambodia from corruption. But the truth is, I had turned my beautiful homeland into a monument to the dangers of utopian extremism. This is my confession, but it is not my story that matters. What matters are the 2 million Cambodians who died because of my utopian delusions, the teachers executed for the crime of literacy, the children who starved in forced labor camps, the families torn apart by my paranoid ideology. I tell you this as a warning. Beware of leaders who promise to return to a golden past, who claim that certain groups of people are the source of all problems, who believe that violence can create paradise. The road to genocide is paved with utopian dreams and righteous anger. Remember my victims, the gentle Khmer people who deserved so much better than my revolution. Never let anyone convince you that mass murder can create a perfect world.